If someone mentions ball droids, you're probably going to think of this little unit, clearly the best thing from those three movies.
Huh?
But sphere-based robots have a long history in sci-fi, and real-fi, from this unwieldy prototype, to these creepy security robots, to whatever these things are, probably because they're so versatile and can deal with any terrain. Well, almost any. But what I'm interested in is making a ball droid sim, something that actually makes you feel like you're piloting a little rolling robot. And I bet long-term subscribers to this channel can guess what I'm thinking here. Yep, with its high dynamic range and ultra-fine control, my theory is that the mouse is the perfect device for a ball droid sim. So, let's find out. The first step, as always, is to get something up and running, and while it might look ugly at first with this pink blob standing in for a ball droid, I can test the basic premise of the control scheme. With the right amount of inertia, it seems like I should be able to make a decent ball droid sim, with fine control and fast movement. Let's add something dangerous. There's no chance you'd be able to navigate this with a gamepad, unless you made the sticks super sensitive, but then you'd lose control at slower speeds. It's cool that you can bounce off that far wall to keep your speed up rather than turning, suggesting something that could be used as a speedrun strategy, or just something that could be part of a level later on. Next up, I've tilted the level a bit here, because we're going to need some 3D perspective to show the ball droid off when I make the 3D model, and I wanted to check that it still controls well. Here's a fun experiment. It's essentially a black hole with gravity, so the player has to figure out the right trajectory to get to the exit. It's possible to get into an orbit around it, and you can escape the orbit by adding a bit of speed. Right then, time to work on getting the game feel right. To help us out, we're going to need our ball droid. Nothing too fancy, a sphere and a cuboid for a head should be enough for now. And while we're at it, let's block in the levels using 3D primitives. Let's give it a go. Straight away, the extra feedback from the basic ball droid model improves things a lot. The head direction gives you feedback on the droid's direction, and the amount of head tilt gives you feedback on the droid's speed. Subtle reinforcement like this really helps with game feel, helping tighten the loop between player input and game response. This is promising enough that it's inspired me to work on a robot's design. The player is small on the screen, so I don't want anything too complex. Big, readable shapes are going to be important. So the head is basically a block with a single eye, and I've added a little antenna on top for some visual detail. Maybe I can make this flop around a bit later on to add some secondary motion. Anyway, let's have a roll around. Already this adds a lot of personality to the game. By the way, did you notice there's a shortcut opportunity on this level? Right there. Let's give it a go. Yep, I'm pretty excited about the speedrun potential for this control scheme. Next up, I want to experiment with introducing some verticality into the game. Check out this simple level with a green bounce pad. With our fixed camera, verticality creates a whole new problem. Namely, there's no way to tell if the bounce pad is lower than the rest of the level, or just not in line with the rest of the level. Luckily, we can fix this with a subtle bit of level design. By placing these warning stripes, we give the player a way to see the spatial relationships between the level blocks, and they can feel confident that the bounce pad is below the rest of the level. But we're not done here. With this added verticality, our droid no longer exists on a 2D plane, so we're going to have the same problem there. To fix this, I added a vertical guideline and a small dot that appears on the level below the droid. Again, this aids the player's spatial model of what's going on. Alright, now we've fixed this, let's go nuts. We've got 3 moving floors here, and because our droid sits on a ball, it can easily slide off, making life difficult enough already. But if you watch closely, you'll notice that the moving floors have a bounce pad underneath them, hinting at a shortcut that uses verticality. Using the tricks we've developed so far to help the player with depth perception, this shortcut becomes possible. Let's add some secondary motion to our little robot friend. Done correctly, secondary motion, like hair movement and cloth simulation, can bring your character to life, as seen in Journey, aka secondary motion the game. But it can be tricky to get right. Let's make the robot's aerial flop around a bit by adding a joint with a spring. The aerial reacts naturally to sudden acceleration and deceleration when the droid hits a wall. Let's take this a bit further. There's a nice Unity asset called Obi Rope, which can be used to add another piece of secondary motion. By adding a thick rope with high tension, I can make a connector hose between the head and the ball. Next up, I really like the modern Toon shading that games like Rollerdrome and Hi-Fi Rush use, and I'm wondering if I can find a distinctive Toon style for this game. I used the Unity Asset Flat Kit in the previous game, Faster, on this channel, and I'm using it again on this one. Link in the description if you want to see the making of Faster, by the way. Alright, let's break down a final look of our ball droid game, layer by layer. The floor has a cell shaded outline, and I added some pencil-like shading to the sides. The entrance and exit pads now light up, and the exit pad has a circular design to show that it's a teleporter to the next level. These walls have a metallic sheen and a white outline, and you can see that the shading is Toon-like. You can also see that the shadows have a penciled-in hatching style applied to them, and it's this hatching style that's going to provide the distinctive look for this game. The def walls have a simple light bloom style, as seen in countless anime. To dress the floors up, I added decals, like this metal tread plate and this painted yellow line, as well as some text to add some flavour to the levels. Finishing up with the decals, I added some spot dirt to add a bit of texture and make the world feel more lived in. Decals like this really help break up the floors and add interest. A few physics props around the place help to add a splash of colour, and these benefit from the pencil shading style too. As part of the gameplay, I also added a life collectible and a bolt collectible for currency. For an added sense of danger, I added some toxic water, which adds a bit of subtle movement to the screen. The HUD design is simple, with a lives display and a bolt collectible display to show the current state. And finally, here's our little droid in the game's new visual style, with outline and pencil shading. Here's how it all looks in motion. The props are driven by physics. I added this proximity effect to warn you that you're too close to the death walls. Let's move on to the level design. Sequenced elements play a large part in these levels, with this set of moving platforms being particularly difficult. These green pinball bouncers use the same green colour scheme as the floor bouncers to hint at their function, and they can be pretty tricky. At least until you realise that at a certain point they all line up. And that's a theme that runs through the levels. In general, there's a long way round, and a shorter way if you're paying attention. Let's change things up a bit. How about a nice little friendo for our robot? I'm thinking that our robot is a defect of some sort, on the run from the factory that made them, and there are security bots sent to shut it down. It makes sense to borrow some of the design language from our droid, with the ball for movement, the single eye and the block head, and then big broad shoulders to make it intimidating. The red boxing glove-like fists are probably a touch too far, but nobody's stopping me, so there you go. This is what they look like in game. They're much heavier than our little droid, so they can bully us pretty easily, but they're not the brightest, so you can outsmart them with some def moves. I'll leave you to figure out how to deal with two of them at once. I'm almost done here, but there's one last thing we need, and that's a voice for our robot. I'm using the same trick that I used in that last video for my egg game, controlling the pigment synth with random LFOs, and using the formant filter to get some voice-like sounds. But this time I'm using FM synthesis to get some squelchy analog radio inspired noises, and I'm setting this through a granular effects module to add little audio glitches. Again, I can cherry pick from the rendered audio file, and the player can trigger these at random during the game by clicking the left mouse button. Finally, let's give the game a name. Hardcode. If you know, you know. Here's a main menu with the logo in place. And as a bonus, from the main menu you can enter this remote control mode and pilot the droid around and trigger the little squawking noises. Okay, let's talk about how you can get your hands on this game. In the past on this channel I've put out the games that I make, like Spin Break, Faster and Egg Goes Right, for free. But for this one I'm afraid I'm going to have to charge real money. Otherwise previous commenter, Mr. Drax's, is going to be teabagging my grave. So with great trepidation, here's the price. $3. Or about the price of a coffee. If you live in the year 2005 and you like bad coffee. It's a short game with 20 levels, but it has a surprising amount of polish, so I think $3 is more than a fair price. Go download on itch.io, link in the description. Don't forget to post your comments on the game below, and I'll see you next time on Indie Dev Lab.